Hello and welcome to this week's episode of #Leadership What's on Your Mind. Remember, we're a podcast to make you stop and think about your leadership journey, and we're going to add tons of value by speaking to amazing people, amazing stories and experts in their field. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel and make sure you follow us on your podcast provider. So we are speaking to Kim today. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, thank you. And you?
Yes, not too bad. I'm super excited to be speaking to you today. You are one of few that have been recommended to me, so that puts you in a good caliber. No pressure, by the way, no pressure. But I've checked out some of the stuff you're doing, and I'm really looking forward to asking you some of the concepts that you've written about. I'm going to talk about that straight away. But it's just great, and you're over in Denmark as well, so I'll get you to introduce yourself in a second. But as I hit the 20-minute timer, it would be good for you to introduce yourself to people who don't know who you are. So off you go. Over to you, Kim.
Well, thank you very much, and firstly, thank you for having me here in the show. My name is Kim Hafjall. I'm 50 years old, and I've just written a book recently, but before that I had 20 years of career that took me across the world. So it started in Denmark in Treasury, in a big corporate. Then I worked in a company that was acquired by a bigger company, and that started the journey around the world. So it gave me an opportunity to live and work in countries like Argentina, United Kingdom, Venezuela, Romania. And it was a very interesting career that went from functional leadership to become more general and eventually just being a managing director. Sadly, what happened was that my mother got a stroke in 2018, and she almost died, got paralyzed and lost ability to speak. And that was kind of very difficult when you live in another country. So I traveled forth and back between Denmark and Romania, trying to be supported with the family, but it didn't really turn out right for me. And I felt I was having to get clear on my values, what really means something to me in life. And I realized that career can be so amazing, and it gave me so much, but family you can't replace. And if you have a good relationship with people around you, you need to prioritize them when you can. So eventually I left the group and I moved back to Denmark, and that's why I'm back in Denmark today. And that's why I chose to write a book.
Yeah, amazing. And completely different, but in 2018, that was the year I left the military. For those obviously different experience, but similar, like feeling there was something, values and family definitely. So I can definitely resonate with those sort of feelings in that sort of year. So let's start with the questions. We're obviously #leadership what's on your mind. What comes to your mind when you hear the word leadership?
Leadership for me is it is inspiring other people. It is to grow other people, and it is to make other people perform at their best. So true leadership for me is inspirational leaders that bring the best out in the teams around them, but also people who are visionary and people who manage to lead corporates and people around them in new and better ways, and create amazing results. Not only financial results, but also human results for the world, environment, and so on.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. So staying with you personally, we ask people to reflect and think about where their leadership journey started. So where do you think your leadership journey started? Is it on reflection that it was now we're asking you about it? Or was there a light bulb moment at the time? Quite a few guests go quite a way back. So how far back can we push you? Where did your leadership journey start?
Yeah, I would say my first response would probably be when I got like the first senior position as a group treasurer in a Danish company. But to be very honest, where I really began to develop as a leader was when I moved to United Kingdom, to London, for that new international group, a very big corporate. And I got a manager who really led. He wasn't a manager, he was a leader. You know, he just inspired me in ways that I'd never been inspired before. And he triggered things in me, reflection, self-awareness, and a curiosity to why I did things in certain ways and how I could do it in a better way. And that's where I think really leadership became visible for me. So it's not so much the position, it's probably a very, very good leader who sparked that interest in me.
Yeah, amazing. And this always, it makes me laugh when we ask that question, because if people are watching us on the YouTube channel, it gets a reaction of people like really sort of like the side and they kind of like really get to think in a deeper, like, where did that start? I know sometimes we do send, like, we're going to ask you those questions, but I love the physical reaction to that question. Going on to the last question about whether you kind of covered it a little bit, but whether there is something else you go to. We say about, if you were to pick one moment or one person, either positive or negative, that has had an impact on your leadership journey, what would you choose?
I think it would probably be the first time I reached the director level, leading a company. I was struggling getting out of my box thinking, really, leading as a general leader. And I struggled hugely with the fact that I wasn't performing as good as I thought I did, or at least my manager didn't believe. And it was a tough realizing that my self-awareness was not in tune with the realities. But when it became, and I accepted the fact that I could improve, it meant that I became a very, very different leader. And I think that has probably been the pivotal moment in my leadership career, where I really began to see things in a very, very different perspective.
Yeah, I love that, because again, I've not said this for quite a long time, actually, but that definitely fits into that box of what I love, helping people. And I'm a big advocate of trying to do it more myself, is that self and situational awareness, that you see more, which allows you the options to do more and have the impact. So I love that. Thank you so much for that. So let's talk about your book. You've authored a book, Vertical Developments, a concept. And the reason why I was really interested in having you on, I've never heard of that before. Purposely, I'm going to get hold of your book and have a read of it, but I purposely haven't, because I want to know from you, what is that? What does it look like? Why that? Why the book? What gives a little bit of a flavor of what that is all about?
Sure. I'll probably give a little bit of a story around the book first.
Yeah, go for it.
Because after I moved back to Denmark, and I used 1 year only helping my mother learn to speak again, I was thinking, do I want to go back in corporate, or do I want to do something different? And I decided to try to write this book. And I wrote the first version, and it was all over the place. It was very long. I sent it to 9 people who were helping, giving feedback, but because it was so long, it took time. So I took a course with something called Being First in the States, like a Zoom course over 3 months in focusing on effective transformation leadership. And they introduced this vertical development for me, which I didn't know at that time either. And it really resonated with me, and it intrigued me, because what they said was, if you haven't reached a certain level of vertical development, then you will struggle to lead complex transformation. And because my career have had a lot of leading change, I could suddenly see the book I had written in a very different light. So when I got all the feedback, I then included it in the book. So I haven't invented it. I've just tried to use it in a more practical way around how I saw myself develop vertically in my career. So it's a biography over my life, a very personal one, and probably was written originally towards showing I've worked a lot with transformation, but it gradually turned much more towards how I as a person developed, and how that development made me much more effective in leadership. So if we talked about vertical development, basically, if you have development, so typically when you develop in school, you take courses at corporate, you get a new skill set, you get horizontally developed. So you get more skills, you get wider. Vertical development is within you, so it's the depth you have. So gradually you become wider in your ability and your capacities to lead, to observe, to analyze, to see things, to interact with other people, and so on. So it's a very complex setup, but basically it's not something you're taught. It's more like a framework within you can see yourself, and you can also see other people, and then you can strive to get to new levels. So I bought a book after that course, which is called Leadership Agility from Joyner and Joseph's. Very, very good book. And they talk about the concept, and they define this leadership agility compass. And that has kind of 4 dimensions. So they have like the context setting. How good are you as a person to see things? Are you very narrow, or can you zoom out? Have you wide angle? Are you visionary? Then you have the stakeholder agility. So it's like, how well do you understand your stakeholders? When you are early leadership, very often you see people with opposing ideas, but you don't necessarily understand them or try to understand them. As you grow, you begin to get wider, you begin to get more rounded. But you also, in your leadership style, maybe in early stages, be very assertive instead of accommodative. You don't listen so much. You don't use the power of coaching. You don't use the power of empowering and visioning and so on. And the third dimension is creative agility. And that's kind of how do you see problems? Are they isolated or are they interrelated? Do you understand the complexity of a problem, or do you see it in the box you work in? It's also around empathy, understanding other people's responses to challenges. And then the last one is self-leadership. That is probably where you are most easily monitored. That is your ability to reflect. Do you reflect? So early, many people don't reflect a lot. Some people reflect after something has happened, but as you grow, you begin to be able to reflect in the situation. How am I actually doing right now in this conversation? You know, should I adjust something and so on? So that's the four.
Do you know what? I love that, because again, it's amazing. We're into the hundreds now of podcast episodes, and that's probably one of the things that has maybe come up more than I would have expected to when we started, the importance of that self-leadership, because the companies and the businesses that we're working with, and both of us are coaching at a high level, the responsibility that you think you have to lead others is probably the bigger focus. And actually to lead yourself is quite a different concept that a lot of people haven't really thought about. And the fact that you lead yourself has a massive impact, as we know, on others without even having to do anything. Like, you really step out of the tell mode, don't you, if you have a little bit more awareness of that. And, you know, just picking up on your book as well, and I did read a little bit about it just before we jumped on, and I'd forgotten to mention it. I love the fact that it's a personal story. Because so many leadership books or self-help books or loads of books are on those models, and I only like the ones that have got the stories, because they're so much easier to make real in your own life. And I always say it's about taking books off the shelf and making them your own. So on the vertical development, what sort of things can people in the short term look to get on that path rather than the horizontal? How does somebody look to start being vertically developed?
I think what is key to understand is probably a little bit around different stages to understand where you are yourself. So vertical development is having a lot of stages. So you have childhood stages, you have teen stages, you have grown-up stages. But then the last 5 that different authors have written about is the leadership levels. And the first one is called expert, then number 2 is called achiever, the third is called catalyst, the 4th highest is co-creator, and the highest is alchemist. Most leaders are operating, like 90% of the leaders are operating in the 2 lowest or even below. So just at least according to the surveys they have made, the authors. So it gives you a little bit of an idea where people are in average.
Yeah.
And to give an example, if you look at an expert leader, which is the first level, they will be brilliant as a supervisor. You know, they will lead a little team. They're very highly focused on a product. They will give feedback to their employees around what they are working on, you know, the tangible thing. They will be very assertive typically. When they talk to their own boss, they may be very accommodative because they have these role models around leadership is empowered by my role. And they rarely reflect upon themselves. So they may have an issue with someone at work, but they won't go home and say, why did it actually end as it did? How could I have done it differently? And so on. When you then get to the next level, the achiever, that's where you begin to reflect. You may, when you sit in the tube home after a long day, sit and think, why did it actually go so wrong, that meeting I had? What could I have done differently? So now you begin to have that reflexive capacity, which you don't have in the early stage. You may also, when you lead, instead of focusing on the tangible result that person is working on, it may be a note or something like that. You focus more on the person. You begin to see the person. How can I help that person grow? So you may say, you've written this note, overall it's fine. Who have you engaged? Have you done stakeholder engagement and so on? So suddenly now you're being developed by a leader who has reached a higher capacity themselves. And in that way, it continues when you go up with the 4 different angles. So how can you use it? Well, I personally wished I understood it much earlier, because it's a little bit like when you lead, very often you lead out of your best effort, but you have no idea what you don't know. Because how would you know, So we have a tendency to be very happy with our leadership style because we are not aware of that it could be so much improved. Only if you get very visionary leaders, which I had there in London, I told earlier, he made me aware that I had some areas which I could hugely improve and how that would benefit me. So if you don't have those leaders, then you can read a book about it and you can begin to go in and see yourself. And the book I mentioned before actually has different levels where you can try to analyze where am I, because they have a lot of stories around different leaders, how they would react, and you can say this is how I would react or it would not. So in that way you can get a sense of where you are yourself. But then as you read the book, you also get a sense around how it could benefit you if you get to a higher stage. And just be very mindful here to say that it's not intelligence. So because you operate at a higher level doesn't make you smarter, but it makes you more rounded. So everyone can develop if they want to. It's not intelligence driven. It's around how much have you progressed in your life around self-awareness, self-leadership, self-development, self-mastery, and so on. And that is where it gets wider and wider and wider.
Yeah, I love that. I know obviously the audience are looking to level up their leadership journey. What sort of things in your experience are holding leaders back from going to those next levels, just so people can look out for those maybe and make sure they don't fit into those categories? What typically holds people back? Because you mentioned that a high percentage of people are only in the first 2 levels. So what typically holds people back from going again?
I think one of the main drivers is very often lack of self-awareness. And self-awareness can be very painful because as you become self-aware, you also become aware of all the faults you have or all the things that are not as good as you wish they were. And many people don't thrive in that space, so they will tend to just shut it off and not reflect so much. They may never have been surrounded by people. So it's not only leaders who can make you grow virtually. If you had parents who were very reflective constantly in your upbringing, you would also be a more reflective person per se. So it's also who you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with a group of people who are very conform in their views and no one provokes each other and everyone just says yes when someone talks, then no one develops. But if you surround yourself with people who provokes you and you accept getting that feedback despite you may not like it, and you take it on board and say it comes with the best intentions, if you begin to see feedback with best intentions, then you begin to absorb it in a more comfortable way because you understand it's not an attack on you as a person. And that is kind of the main driver to begin to be self-aware. And if you don't start becoming self-aware, you won't really develop. So I think it comes back to accepting that you're not perfect and it doesn't feel right and it doesn't feel nice. But as you begin to get through that phase, you also begin to get through a phase where you see that you can actually do something about it.
Yeah, amazing. So I love that. I love that way of, and again, I was going to ask you a little bit about like lifelong learning and full potential, but I think you've covered it off there. We've got 2 minutes left. So I'm going to get you to share a little bit about, obviously, you love what you do. We were having a catch up before we jumped on. About the power. I'm going to ask you about the power of coaching. Like for you, what is coaching? Why do you coach people? And what is your driver? And why do you like it so much? Because again, we're in the same category of loving what we do. Like it's phenomenal. I feel like it's a privilege to do what we do as well. So from your perspective, just last couple of minutes, what's coaching for you?
I think coaching for me is creating a space for the one you coach to develop. So coaching for me is not sharing my experience, it's virtually helping them grow in their space. So there is no right and wrongs. And when you get a coach, for instance, back to the critique, if you have a good relationship with a coach, you know, it's not a friend, it's not someone you know, it's someone who is trying to help you grow. And they give you things to think about around yourself and it's not comfortable. You know, it comes with the best intention. And that is where coaching is so impactful because it stays in that room. You may be able to share all your weaknesses with the coach. The coach may help you understand that it may not be weaknesses, it may be challenging points, and some of them can even be seen as positives, but also help you make strategies to work yourself up and away from those challenges. And I think that is where coaching is very impactful, because it is a one-to-one closed space, a lot of trust, and people feel relaxed in that environment. And then they can go out and try new strategies, grow from them, go back, share their emotions. If you do it with your partner or with your friends, when they come with something, you always have this little bit, why are you giving me critique? Why are you not supporting me? And so on. A coach is not there to tell you you're good. A coach is there to tell you what they hear you saying and give you a new perspective of how you think.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. You just made me laugh a little bit internally, because one of my first experiences outside the military was similar to what you're saying. That the person I coached, they always spoke to their family, friends, employees, stakeholders, directors, and they said afterwards, so they just nod and say yes and agree. And it was only till they had an external perspective. I had no idea about his businesses and how it all worked, and the fact that I didn't have that was a massive benefit, because I was just asking simple questions, which was amazing, me just coming out the military bubble. So Kim, thank you so much. Always a sign of a great conversation when these podcasts go really quickly. And we were saying about the challenge before we jumped on, didn't we? So we got through it, got everything in there. So ladies and gents, if you enjoyed that, make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Make sure you follow us on your podcast provider. Make sure you tell us. I love the feedback. Every episode's different. Everybody gets a different perspective and gets something different from each of the episodes and the amazing guests. Make sure in the links below, in the podcast notes, there's going to be a link over to go and check out Kim's book and his LinkedIn and connections below there. Go and check him out and connect over there. Kim, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
And ladies and gents, we'll see you all next week, 6 a.m. Wednesday. Amazing guests coming your way. Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.